in late July of 2023, a blonde woman in a pink dress was caught on camera running after a man and his dog while wielding a 2x4 in the area of Blue Jays Way and Wellington Street in Toronto, Canada. The clip had begun with the unnamed woman walking away from the camera while holding her purse. In the moments that followed, she dropped her belongings, grabbed a plank from a nearby construction site and chased after the man walking his dog. The clip ended with her flinging the plank at them, narrowly missing the pet. It remained unclear what had prompted the woman's violent reaction. The clip went viral, particularly given that the incident had occurred during the recent release of the Barbie movie, starring Margot Robbie in the titular role. One of the online commenters wrote Harley Quinn dressed up as Barbie in reference to Robbie having played both roles. A subsequent clip captured from overhead showed the woman lying face down on the ground and surrounded by 3 police officers with the caption, "They got Barbie." Number 6. Alicia Amira. Over the course of a decade leading up to July of 2023, Swedish woman Alicia Amira spent nearly $130,000 on plastic surgery to transform herself into a real-life Barbie doll. The 31-year-old woman quit her high-paying PR job in Sweden and moved to London with the intention of pursuing the extreme makeover which eventually left her unrecognizable from her former self. Discussing the enhancements on Twitter, Amira stated, "I've erased who I used to be in order to become a plastic bimbo." Her surgeries included several breast augmentations, filler around multiple areas of her face, and rhinoplasty. Amira faced heavy criticism not only for her extreme modifications, but also because of her online statements. She identified as an anti-feminist and a stern believer in traditional gender roles, speaking out in support of women choosing to become trophy wives. In 2016, Amira founded the Bimbo Movement, aimed at removing the stigma from those who chose to get surgery towards achieving hyper-feminine aesthetics. The woman who made money through her lucrative OnlyFans account was again criticized for glorifying addiction to plastic surgery. Amira admitted that the procedures were addictive but nevertheless stated an intention of having further work done in spite of the costs or risks to her health. She told a media outlet, "Bimbos don't age, we're just getting more and more plastic." Number 5. Latia Henderson. On February the 3rd of 2021, motorists on Australia's Hume Highway called the police after spotting a human hand frantically waving out of the broken headlight of a Holden Commodore. Law enforcement stopped the vehicle and then confronted the 2 occupants, 18-year-old Latia Henderson and 24-year-old Kaylee Ketley, asking if there was someone in the trunk. Both women pretended to be shocked by the prospect. An officer then opened the trunk to find 24-year-old Nisha Phillips, who was crying, panting, and bleeding from knife wounds to her knee, shoulder, thigh, and forearm. She replied affirmatively when asked if the 2 women had taken her hostage, and the duo was consequently arrested. Phillips, the Commodore's owner, was friends with Ketley and Henderson, who was 12 weeks pregnant at the time. Earlier in the day, she'd been driving them around the Sydney area in her new car. Henderson had cultivated a gangster Barbie persona on social media, with one of her glamorous posts reading, "Hustle the pretty things." Ketley was also described as a wannabe gangster who'd been charged in connection with knifing a roommate in both legs the previous year. Her social media posts were often centered on guns, jewelry, or gangster rap lyrics. Since meeting the duo in November of 2020, Phillips would sometimes hang out with them and drive them around as neither had a license. During the February drive, Ketley asked Phillips that they stop for McDonald's, which the latter refused, and then that she changed the music but was turned down once again. Upon reaching home in Glenfield, Ketley stabbed Phillips in the knee and upper thigh, telling her all you had to do was stop. Ketley threatened to make the woman squeal like a pig, telling her, "Today I am going to kill you." She took Phillips's wallet and car keys, then left with Henderson in the Commodore. Upon returning less than an hour later, Ketley expressed disappointment that Phillips was still alive and forced her into the vehicle's trunk at knife point. Henderson got behind the wheel and sometime later stopped the Commodore only to stab Phillips before resuming the drive. Social media videos were later played in court showing the pregnant teen and Henderson, both of whom had smoked ice and cannabis, joking and singing along to hip-hop songs, all the while Phillips was in the trunk. The GPS indicated that the women were heading towards Belanglo State Forest, and conversations between them suggested that they'd planned to further harm Phillips. While drifting in and out of consciousness, the latter managed to use her fingernail to unscrew the tail light from inside the trunk and put out her arm to alert passing motorists. Upon being arrested, her kidnappers initially claimed that they didn't know about her being in the trunk before changing their story. Henderson ultimately pleaded guilty to take and drive a conveyance and take or detain in company with the intent to commit grievous bodily harm. Ketley pleaded guilty to take and drive conveyance without consent, take or detain in company with the intent to cause grievous bodily harm and reckless wounding. Henderson, who gave birth to a daughter as the legal proceedings unfolded, was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, while Ketley was given a minimum sentence of 11 years. Number 4. Lindsay Shiver. Leading up to the summer of 2023, Robert Shiver, a former football player at Auburn University, had hired a private detective to tail his wife Lindsay on the island of Abigail in the Bahamas. Back in their university days, when Robert was captain of the football team, Lindsay was a cheerleader at Auburn. She was also a beauty queen, having been named Miss Houston County in 2005. The couple had 3 children and owned property stretching from Georgia to the Caribbean. Robert at one point came to believe that his wife was cheating on him and hired an investigator who followed the woman across several locations in the Bahamas. Robert's suspicions were confirmed as the detective snapped several photos of Lindsay with her lover, 28-year-old bartender Terrence Adrian Bethel. It would emerge that the woman had met him while vacationing in Great Guana Cay in the Abaco Islands, where Robert's family owned a home. She had been seeing the bartender for several months. Robert filed for divorce, reportedly sending Bethel a sarcastic message in which he thanked him for taking care of his wife. The material gathered by the private investigator was expected to weigh heavily in the custody and property dispute to come. Robert and the children remained at the couple's home in Thomasville, Georgia, while Lindsay was cut off from access to the luxurious residence and to the family's private jet. She reportedly continued traveling to the Bahamas to see Bethel. As the legal battle ensued, an unrelated break-in occurred at Grabber's Bar and Grill on Guana on July the 16th of 2023. Bethel and other staff members were asked to surrender their phones during the ensuing police investigation. Upon examining the man's phone, law enforcement discovered conversations between Lindsay Bethel and aspiring music producer Farron Newbold, in which they planned to murder Robert. Lindsay had sent Newbold, who was reportedly meant to carry out the hit, a photo of Robert saying, "Kill him." The trio was taken into custody, but they weren't immediately required to enter pleas, and their charges remained unspecified. Lindsay admitted to sending the messages, but claimed she was only venting to friends about her failed marriage. The alleged conspirators' next court date was set for the fall of 2023. Number 3. Georgia Woman. Started in mid-January of 2016, British woman Georgia Woman was featured prominently in international tabloids and nicknamed the Barbie Bandit after being tied to a series of robberies in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Woman grew up in the affluent village of Great Bedwin near Marlborough, Wiltshire, and a source described her as a teenage troublemaker. They said that Woman would routinely shoplift and was banned from her prom, but would usually get out of trouble by batting her eyelashes. Others who knew Woman described her as sweet and innocent, claiming she'd never been in trouble with the law. Shortly after moving to the South American country with her Argentine stepmother, she relocated to Buenos Aires with boyfriend Jose Mino, with whom she had a child. Their Manzanares home was raided by a dozen local law enforcement officers on January the 14th of 2016. Woman woke up and went to get her young son, at which point she was held at gunpoint by the police, who shouted at her to get on the floor, demanding to know where Mignon was. The couple had been identified as the leading figures behind a criminal gang responsible for at least 16 robberies carried out in gated communities in the Buenos Aires area and beyond. The gang would typically tie up the wealthy homeowners and then ransack their mansions. Further raids on Warman and Mignot's alleged accomplices led to the seizure of numerous goods, including laptops, jewelry, watches and cameras, but also items believed to have been used in the robberies, such as handcuffs, balaclavas, police uniforms, weapons and ammunition. 26-year-old woman was detained under suspicion of aggravated concealment for aiding her boyfriend, who hailed from a respected family of polo players, in hiding the stolen goods. Woman denied any and all criminal activity, telling the media, "I'm entirely innocent, yet the world now knows me as the Barbie Bandit." Woman wasn't officially charged with a crime in the immediate aftermath of her detainment. She subsequently stated an intention of suing the police for mistreating her during the arrest. Number 2. Ophelia Vanity. Born Lisa Zhang, Los Angeles woman Ophelia Vanity spent thousands in an effort to turn herself into a living Barbie doll. By the spring of 2018, she had multiple procedures that included a rhinoplasty, monthly Botox injections, and an eyelid surgery to round up her natural half-Chinese eye shape. Speaking on the latter procedure, Vanity told a media outlet, "I just think that Barbie is very iconic. I'm definitely not trying to be racist." The 30-year-old accepted that Barbie dolls were made in various skin colors and ethnicities, but stated that she identified more with the original design. Vanity's decision to emulate the mainstream Barbie look had led to her gathering a following of over 70,000 on Instagram alone. She explained her desire to look like a human doll as a byproduct of low self-esteem and body dysmorphia disorder. Vanity had also battled anorexia and drug addiction. As of 2018, she was nevertheless committed to getting more surgery, including the removal of several ribs to achieve a smaller waist, in spite of the risks to her health. Subsequent updates indicated that Vanity passed away on April the 18th of 2020 at the age of 34. YouTuber 50 Shades of Chest Pains comprehensively investigated the woman in a documentary that follows her life, from her days as a party girl to developing the Barbie obsession and to her last days. An autopsy report obtained by the YouTuber indicated that Vanity had multiple drugs in her system at the time of her death, including methamphetamine, heroin, ketamine, and methadone. The report classified the cause of death as an accident. If you have not yet seen our video about when private clubs go wrong, then you can stay tuned after number 1 to watch that one as well still. Number 1. Abigail White. English law enforcement in Kingswood, South Gloucestershire was called to a home on Chipperfield Drive on March the 25th of 2022. They found 22-year-old Bradley Lewis, who'd suffered a stab wound to his chest which was nearly 3 inches deep and had penetrated his heart. He passed away several hours later. The police arrested Lewis's girlfriend, 23-year-old Abigail White, for the killing. White was an OnlyFans model who called herself Fake Barbie on the streaming platform, where she'd made over $63,000 in 1 year. It emerged that she'd plunged the blade into Lewis's chest on the same day that the man had told her he no longer wanted to be in a relationship with her. In the breakup's aftermath, they went out drinking with friends. White was intoxicated and had also taken a small amount of cocaine before she started a fight with other pub goers. She and Lewis consequently left. Within minutes of them arriving at the home, a neighbor heard White screaming. The neighbor entered the home to find Lewis lying on the kitchen floor and White claiming that he'd hurt himself. Following her arrest, White admitted to delivering the fatal knife strike. She told investigators that she'd only meant to scare Lewis, adding, "Before I knew it, I had stabbed him." It emerged that a few days prior to the deadly incident, she'd knifed Lewis in the arm following an argument. On another occasion, Lewis had phoned a friend regarding White's aggressive behavior towards him and said, "Help me, she's trying to kill me, she's trying to stab me, she keeps beating me up, she's hurting me." White eventually admitted manslaughter, and in the fall of 2022, she was given a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years behind bars. Number 8. Creio Bishop. West Virginia man Creio Bishop was arrested after attempting to burn down JB's Gentlemen's Club in Huntington in the early hours of December the 13th of 2017. Court records detailed how Bishop had remained in the area to watch the fire burning from across the street and even tried to stop a concerned passerby from dialing 911. Officers eventually found him in the parking lot of a nearby Walmart, where they took him into custody on second-degree arson charges. As indicated by a criminal complaint, Bishop had excitedly stated that he'd started the fire because he was tired of his girlfriend working at the club. The man's girlfriend was identified as Michaela Beidenbach, who'd reportedly been employed at JB's for 6 months prior to the incident. The club's manager told a local news station that he would likely need to terminate Beidenbach out of concerns that Bishop would repeat his actions and it might be worse next time. Number 7. The Scores Hustlers. In June of 2014, federal law enforcement took 4 exotic dancers into custody on suspicion of operating a pernicious blackmailing scheme at a pair of New York City gentlemen's clubs. The alleged ringleader of the scam was 40-year-old Samantha Barbash, a hostess at Scores Gentlemen's Club in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. Barbash, along with the 3 other dancers implicated in the resulting criminal complaint, would allegedly target wealthy businessmen they encountered at high-end restaurants and bars. After seducing the individuals, the women would drug them by lacing their drinks with a cocktail of various substances, including ketamine, methadone, and cocaine. While their targets were in a drug-induced stupor, the women lured them to the clubs where they worked. It was there that they stole their credit cards, charging thousands of dollars in drinks and dances that the impaired men hadn't requested. In turn, the establishments would give Barbash and the other dancers a cut of the proceeds they generated through the scheme. The women also allegedly took compromising photographs of the victims that were subsequently used to blackmail them into silence. According to federal investigators, the group had stolen approximately $200,000 between September and December of 2013, including $135,000 from a New Jersey cardiologist named Zayed Yunan. Barbash ultimately pleaded guilty to charges of conspiracy, assault, and grand larceny. She was consequently sentenced to 5 years of probation. The case involving her and the other dancers served as the basis for the 2019 comedy drama Hustlers, starring Jennifer Lopez and Constance Wu. Number 6. The Stormy Daniels lawsuit. Adult film actress Stephanie Clifford, professionally known as Stormy Daniels, was awarded a $450,000 payout in September of 2019 after settling her lawsuit against an Ohio gentlemen's club. Daniels' legal dispute with the Sirens Club in Columbus stemmed from an incident that had occurred in the summer of the previous year. While performing at the establishment in July of 2018, Daniels allegedly made improper physical contact with 3 undercover police officers who subsequently arrested her. The charges levied against the dancer were later dropped. The decision was made following an FBI investigation into the matter, which determined that the officers had violated the Columbus Division of Police's rules of conduct during their interaction with her. Daniels accused the law enforcement officials of targeting her in a sting operation in an effort to protect the interests of President Donald Trump, with whom she'd been involved in a highly publicized civil dispute at the time. Although her attorney indicated that Daniels could have received a higher payout, she ultimately accepted the $450,000 after the officers who'd arrested her were formally disciplined by the police department. Number 5. Heather Lane Billings. 43-year-old Heather Lane Billings, the owner of 2 private clubs in Del City, Oklahoma, faced criminal charges following an undercover police investigation that culminated in 2018. Court documents detailed how officers had witnessed several of the exotic dancers under Billings' employ engage in illegal lewd acts with customers and openly sell them banned substances, including cocaine. In August of 2016, Billings had taken over ownership of the clubs Fantasy Island and Midway Island from her husband, who'd been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Investigators alleged that the woman had been fully aware of the illegal activities being performed by her employees and neglected to take any action to stop them. She was consequently charged with maintaining a place where a controlled, dangerous substance is sold, as well as conspiracy and filing a false instrument. The latter charge reportedly stemmed from the fact that Billings had lied about having insurance in order to illegally obtain a liquor license. As of the latest updates on the case, Billings was still awaiting a trial date. Number 4. Alicia Ruiz and Anthony Bates. At around 3 a.m. on May the 7th of 2021, Pinellas County Sheriff's deputies were called to the Diamond Dolls Gentlemen's Club in Pinellas Park, Florida, after receiving reports of shots fired on the premises. According to the resulting police report, the incident involved 21-year-old Alicia Ruiz and her boyfriend, Anthony Bates, aged 30. The latter's ex-girlfriend had arrived at the club, accompanied by her mother, at which point an argument broke out between the two parties. A row between Ruiz and Bates' ex-girlfriend eventually spilled out into the rear parking lot. The police later revealed that Ruiz then pulled out a handgun and fired 2 rounds with bullet fragments, clipping both the ex-girlfriend and her mother. Fortunately, the victims only sustained minor injuries in the shooting. Upon the arrival of emergency responders, they were taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. Ruiz and Bates were later tracked down to a convenience store parking lot. The young woman was arrested on a charge of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, while her boyfriend, who'd allegedly driven the getaway vehicle, was charged with being a principal to an aggravated battery. There had also been an unrelated warrant out for Bates's arrest in connection to a case involving a suspended driver's license. Number 3. David Robinson. Georgia resident David Robinson was released from prison on October 14th of 2017 after serving an 8-year sentence on an armed robbery conviction. To celebrate his discharge, the 34-year-old man reportedly accompanied some of his friends to the Peaches Gentlemen's Club in Atlanta. However, after they pulled into the club's parking lot at about 1:40 a.m., Robinson brandished a firearm. Suddenly, and for no apparent reason, he fatally shot 29-year-old Jalla Ross Bayer, with whom he'd been friends since childhood. Subsequent reports detailed how Robinson then took aim at another one of his friends, who managed to flee before getting hit. When approached by the club security personnel, Robinson fired at them as well, before fleeing the scene. He tried to make his escape by scaling a fence, but it collapsed on top of him, and he was taken into custody of Atlanta police. In September of 2019, it was reported that Robinson had been convicted of murder charges, and he was consequently sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Number 2. Ashley Barrett. Florida police responded to reports of a disturbance at the VIP Gentlemen's Club in Key West at about 5:30 p.m. on September 13th of 2018. Upon their arrival, officers learned that a dancer at the establishment, 26-year-old Ashley Barrett, had allegedly attacked 2 of her co-workers, one of whom had been sleeping at the time. The victims told the police that Barrett, who was intoxicated, had waved a hair straightener at them saying, "We're going to play an evil game. I'm going to get you when you least expect it." Following Barrett's arrest, the police found that it was actually the second time she'd been taken into custody on that day. It was reported that earlier in the afternoon, law enforcement had been notified of a situation at the Bottle Cap Lounge, where Barrett had allegedly been handing out VIP cards to customers, a prohibited practice under city regulations. An employee at the club contacted Barrett's co-workers, who subsequently accompanied her back to the VIP Gentlemen's Club, where it was reported they resided. At that point, Barrett brandished a knife and began waving it threateningly at her colleagues. She was consequently arrested under the Marchman Act, which is legislation used for taking people into custody who are under the influence of drugs or need help. As detailed in court records, Barrett ultimately faced criminal charges of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. She was reportedly held at Stock Island Detention Center on a $35,000 bond pending the commencement of her case's legal proceedings. Number 1. Stanley Szeliga. On October 26 of 2021, Abigail Saldana, an exotic dancer from Texas, was found dead behind the wheel of her vehicle at an exit near the Dallas club where she worked. Officers at the scene determined that the 22-year-old had been fatally shot, an aspect supported by the discovery of 3 bullet casings inside the car. Shortly thereafter, the police spoke with the manager of Rick's Cabaret, who confirmed that Saldana had been employed at the establishment. Through subsequent interviews, law enforcement learned that the young woman had recently been stalked and harassed by a frequent patron named Stanley Szeliga, aged 54. In a video posted to Saldana's Instagram account roughly 2 weeks before her death, the dancer revealed she had found what appeared to be a tracking device on the underside of her car. Following further investigation, it also emerged that a license plate reader had spotted Szeliga's vehicle near Saldana's residence on at least 5 separate occasions within a 12-day period, including 17 minutes before the shooting was reported. 2 days after Saldana's death, the police went to Szeliga's Irving residence, where following a brief standoff, they found him with self-inflicted cuts all over his body after receiving treatment for the wounds, which were described as mostly superficial. The suspect was arrested and charged with Saldana's murder. In their efforts to establish a potential motive for the crime, investigators concluded that Szeliga had grown upset with the victim, claiming she'd taken advantage of him and swindled him out of thousands of dollars. Thanks for watching. If you had the possibility to bring a toy to life, which would you choose and why? Let us know in the comments section below.